One of the greatest things about Ernest Hemingway and reading Ernest Hemingway's short stories, especially, is that every time you read them, the stories change, not because the words on the page are different, but because you are in a different place in your life. You have more life experience. You can bring more things into that story and understand different quirks and qualities of the characters. Today's short story has a great big swinging point that I had never, ever noticed before. Welcome to Strip Cover Lit. I am Adrian Fort, and we are here for the 15th in a read along series that journeys short story by short story through Ernest Hemingway's Finca Vigia edition. This short story will appear, of course, in the Ernest Hemingway read along playlist, but also in the short story playlist, short story discussion playlist. What we will have today is a So What Happened section where we talk about what happened in the short story, a literary criticism section, and a writer's corner section of this discussion. So, the short story in question is known as Mr. and Mrs. Elliot. It did have a different title when it was first written that caused someone to hate Ernest Hemingway for the rest of his life. So, what happens in Mr. and Mrs. Elliot? Hubert Elliot was a virgin and a poet. And these things might have been related, especially since Hubie writes long, drawn out poems. Well, he has a friend named Cornelia, and she's a virgin too, which is very important to Hubert. But not until later, not until they had been dancing in the back of the shop, and they kissed. They had been just friends, but at that moment it turned into more than friends. Then they had to be married. Had to be married, and now, of course, they're trying to have a baby, except that they aren't. They aren't any longer trying to have a baby, despite where the short story starts. They were. They were trying to have a baby. They did try when they were new in Europe. But then they brought Cornelia's friend over to keep Cornelia company, and now Cornelia and her friend share the bed, and as the last sentence of the short story tells us, where's the beginning of this story? They had, in the evening, they all sat together in the garden under a plane tree, and the hot evening wind blew, and Elliot drank white wine, and Mrs. Elliot and the girlfriend made conversation, and they were all quite happy. What is the tone of that last sentence? I'm not quite sure that it is honest. So, getting into the literary criticism portion of this short story, how do we better understand this short story? So what? Right? This short story, probably 500 words, maybe. And what's the point of it? We get to the end, and if everybody is just kind of happy, where did we start the story? Where did we end the story? And why was the story told? There is no real up and down if they start pretty happy and they end pretty happy. But supposedly, this short story is actually about someone. Hemingway put his dirty laundry out into the presses. A guy named Chard Powers. I've never heard of Chard Powers. Apparently, Chard Powers Smith, pardon me, and apparently the original title of this short story was Mr. and Mrs. Smith. So, uh, Brad and Angelina eat your hearts out. An old Chard held a lifelong grudge against Hemingway because of this short story and its spitefulness. Um, Now, in real life, so this is sort of the nastiest bit here. In real life, Chard's mother and his wife Olivia, or I think it's Olivia. I don't know if I misspelled it in my note taking here. Both of them, Olivia, who would be Cornelia in the story, they both died of complications during labor, which makes the short story itself super inconsiderate in the least, right? You write this short story about a guy who is sort of weak in his relationship, a relationship that is sort of in itself, in its inception, in a way passive aggressive. You write that short story, and the whole point of the beginning of the short story is that these two people are trying to have a baby. Well, in real life, the guy who you are making fun of with this short story, both his mother and his wife died of complications during childbirth. And I believe both of those events would have happened prior to the publication of this short story. Of course, we don't know if both of those events would have happened prior to the writing of this short story. Hemingway was notorious for editing, so did he write this short story painfully over the period of months and then whittle it back, whittle it back, whittle it back, whittle it back? We don't know. But I believe probably both of those things were known to Hemingway before he went out and published this short story. So here's the... It would be possible, I think, to give a generous interpretation of this short story wherein Hubert is not all that weak of a man. He succumbed to his emotions in the moment, a romantic moment, kissed a woman, and then decided, yeah, this is the one. Turns out the relationship itself was ill-fated. That's possible. That is a decent reading of this short story. You can have that reading and not have to go the extra mile to say that Hubert is a weak character, that Hubert is a less than man, right? Sort of in these Hemingway terms, he is less than a man. But here's the thing. When you really get into the details of this short story, if you're trying to actually delve down into what's happening on the page, Hubert and his wife try to have a baby. In the short story, they cannot. This is a shot at Hubert's masculinity. Hubert, it is said, had not been with women before his wife, Cornelia. This is a shot through Hemingway's eyes. I mean, you can read all of Hemingway and come out with this. This is a shot at Hubert's masculinity, that he had not been with many, many women. In the end of this short story, Hubert is pushed out of his own marriage bed by Cornelia's friend. Not only that, Cornelia's female friend. This is a shot at Hubert's masculinity. His wife has pushed him out of the bed and has taken instead another woman. Now, Hubert, so we're going to get a little bit into names here because sometimes the Ernest Hemingway short stories are such that the points can be made by what is in the text and not having to delve into the meaning of names. Hemingway very good with picking a name. Why did you pick this name, etc.? Why is this character named this and not that? It has to do with the meaning of the names. This short story, you can make these points without the names, but boy, does it become very on the nose when you look into the names themselves. Hubert means bright or shining intellect. Okay, great. We get that from Hubert. We don't get brawny. He's not brawny. He's not the big, strong guy. He's not the masculine ideal with broad shoulders, a deep voice, and a stunning beard. He's none of those things. He's a bright guy. Maybe, in fact, too bright. Because he's too bright to he's too busy with superfluous ideas to really understand the things going on around him. And Hemingway seems to make the point that despite the fact that he is so bright, he's not very successful. And this happens a lot with people who are. So, what Hemingway is essentially saying with this is you can be bright, and other people will come in and take advantage of the ideas that you present. Without the brawn to stand up for those ideas, you're just being milked for productivity by other people. You can't lay down the law and keep your you can't lay down the law and eat what you kill, right? You cannot produce and benefit directly from that. Now, so we have what Hubert means. Bright boy, right? We get that all the time in Hemingway, this idea of the bright boy. You can get that from the Killers. They come in, they sit down. Oh, this is a bright boy, isn't it? He's got all of these wonderful answers. He doesn't have the brawn to stop us. Do you know what Cornelia means? This is too much. What Cornelia means is simply too much. Cornelia means horn. Okay, so what? Horn. Well, if you don't know the history of what horns mean in English literature, there is an idea, I believe this comes from medieval England. You've heard the term, I'm sure, we're here on the internet. You've heard of the term cuckold. C-U-C-K. Cuck. Cuckold. Cuckolding. Cuckolded. Cuckold. What this means is that a man's wife is seeing someone else. Okay, what does that have to do with this? Well, I guess it's a wives' tale. Maybe that is too much to say about this this phenomenon. The old wives' tale in English literature is that if your wife was sleeping with someone behind your back, it would force you to grow horns. You would grow horns if your wife was cheating on you behind your back. That was the result of cuckolding. So we have here Cornelia, whose name means horn, making Hubert leave his life. They go to Europe. She decides Hubert is not man enough. She decides Hubert is not husband enough. She decides Hubert is not enough to keep her company. She forces Hubert to bring over the old girlfriend she had, her old friend from the shop. Her friend gets there, and now Hubert has to sleep on the couch. Hubert doesn't even sleep in the bed anymore, and at the end of the story, it is not Hubert entertaining his wife, it's her friend, while they all watch the sunset. What Hemingway, with this simple name Cornelia, is doing is suggesting not only is Cornelia sharing the bed with her friend, she's sharing intimacy with her friend. She's sharing those things that might be shared between a husband and his wife, because her name is Horns. Her name is indicating that Hubert himself is a cuckold. So, Writer's Corner. What notes can we take from this short story as writers? The big one to me, because I'm going to be very, very honest with you. I read this short story 8 minutes, right? And was very disappointed that I then had to find some way to talk about it for 15 minutes. Because surface level, there's nothing here. Surface level, there's nothing compelling. There's no interesting tricks of the trade with writing. There's no play with the temporal plane of the short story. It's all just, well, there's a little bit of that, but it's all just sort of words on a page, and everyone starts kind of happy and everyone ends kind of happy, and there's a maybe bad or less than ideal relationship in the middle. Who cares? if you wrote this short story and it appeared in my Twitter feed because it's that short, I probably would not have finished it. I certainly would not have done the work to understand all of the stuff below the surface. Right? This has to be understood by writers. Hemingway has a reputation. Hemingway is Hemingway. So, of course, when presented a short story like this, I am willing to say, okay, there must be something more here. I don't get it. Let me do the work. If your work, so it's very clever, right? All of the interesting stuff, you got to do a little digging below the surface to get to. It is clever in that fashion. If you are submitting your work to the Missouri Review, you are submitting your work to the New Yorker, if you don't have a name, don't matter. So, what this means is you're going to have to put something shiny on the surface level of your story. You are going to have to make it much more fun to read than is this short story. Because if you get an editor that looks at your byline and says, I don't know who that is, they wrote this short story, nothing happens, rushing it, right? Light it on fire, it's gone. That is the danger of writing work that is too clever. These editors who are receiving your stories do not have the time to sit down and say, oh, okay, there might be something going on here. Let me get my quarter out and see if I can scratch below that surface. You have to have something that grabs them. You have to have something that moves them. And indeed, it is not just editors that are going to work this way. It's readers. Like I said, here I am. I've got a channel on YouTube that I've been running for nearly a decade now. And I have been talking about literature the entire time. Obviously, it means something to me. But if I saw this short story and instead of Ernest Hemingway, the byline was John Smith, wouldn't have read it twice. Wouldn't have gone back through. Wouldn't have said, let me see what work I can do, what labor I can put into this short story to get something out of it. If this were by John Smith, it would not have been finished. Which, look, I understand that is a flawed way of reading. I understand that is a flawed critique in itself. It's real, right? That is the danger of trying to be a Hemingway. Now, here's something else that we can take from this poem, or from this short story. Been doing a lot of poetry lately, if you can't tell. This short story begins with begins telling us about two people with the highest level of commitment two people can share. These two people are attempting to have a baby. You do not get levels of commitment above that. These two people are saying, not only do we like each other, not only in some way do we belong to one another, but also that, hey, we're willing to belong to one another for the next 18 years in order to rear a child. We think we get along so well that we can bring another person into this world and not just have a person, but shape that person, because we are so superior, in a way that person comes out the other end as a productive member of society, something that would be very difficult to pull off, right? Look around you. It's very difficult to pull off. From that, the highest level of commitment, I don't, tell me what other level of commitment is greater than that. Not better than that. I'm not saying that. What other level of commitment is greater than that? More all-encompassing than that? I can't think of one. Not only are these people in a committed relationship, they're trying to have a child, and then the story slowly fades as we start back here. As we zoom in, their relationship fades to the fact where we understand, oh, well, they're not trying to have that baby anymore. They don't even share the same bed anymore. Not only do they not share the same bed anymore, she's had someone move into the bed. Not only has she had someone move into the bed, she's not really even talking to him anymore. They share their evenings kind of together. They share their evenings in the same vicinity, but they are not in a loving, committed relationship. This is a really interesting way to sort of illustrate the fact that people will show us in a relationship what they want to show us. It does not mean that the relationship is actually working in that fashion. So, what this becomes is showing, not telling. Hemingway doesn't have to tell us that they don't have a happy relationship. In fact, through the short story, even that last line, what Hemingway is telling us is that these two people are really quite happy. In fact, these three people are really quite happy. That's what Hemingway is telling us, while he is showing us a different reality entirely. That's a way to do it, right? That is an interesting way to do it. That is a way that sets up the universe of these characters. It sets up the universe of the characters rather than laying it down. This makes us read into the characters as opposed to understand just what the writer is slapping in our face. So that is all I have for this short story discussion. I am going short story by short story through the Finkavigia edition, so if this is something in which you are interested, consider hitting the subscribe button to make sure you are around for more poetry or short story discussions from Ernest Hemingway. If you like what I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. And as always, I hope to have you back for the next one.